Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to work on a viewer request. They had asked me, can we work on a Abu bait casting reel? And I had this one just come in the shop. It's a 5500C. It, for the most part, seems to be working fine. The customer's complaining about a sticking drag. So I think I went ahead and I ordered a drag washer for it. It only has the one drag washer in this system. And I'm going to assume that that's the problem, but I'll also show you how to take this reel apart, not only service the drag, but service the balance of the reel while we are at it. So this one is an older reel, but for those of you that have the Abu round baitcaster ambassadors, they've been around forever, and the design really has not changed too much. So the procedures I'm going to do here will apply to more than just this reel. For the purposes of working on the ambassador, you need a small screwdriver. I like to keep a needle nose pliers behind because the pinion shaft tends to turn. 10mm wrench. I'm working on the drag, so I generally have a razor knife available to me to flip that out of the main gear. Then of course you need the replacement drag. So I'm going to start by taking the nut cap off, and then we can get to that 10mm nut. You'll notice there's an E-clip inside the nut. Generally, you can turn this nut off without taking the E-clip off first, which makes it easier to do. That E-clip holds the pinion gear to the bridge, so it's an important piece. It's easier to do it this way if you can. You'll notice I'm putting all of my parts into a parts tray. This happens to be the bottom of a milk jug, and the reason I do that is I don't want to lose them, and it's too easy to lay those things down on your work table and then have trouble trying to grab it in the end. You'll also notice I'm wearing a protective glove. I like to do that to keep the contaminants off my hand. I have trouble with the glove on my working hand, so I don't use it, but I would recommend going to get these gloves if you're going to be working on reels. They're cheap enough. They're available typically in dollar stores and that. And they'll keep the junk and grime off. Okay, so I took the handle off. There's a little handle spring tensioner behind that. Then we're down to the drag nut. I take that star drag off, and I'm doing this before I remove the gear side. It's just easier for me to do it while it's on the reel. And I know the setup for this reel, but if you don't, I recommend that you take pictures along the way, and that way it'll be easier for you when you go to reinstall it if you've forgotten where a piece or a part went, or if you happen to look in that parts bucket over there and find that there's an extra piece around. If you take steps on an intermediate basis, then you can go back and say, oh, that's where that small screw came from, or that's where that spring was, or so on. Okay. All right, so we're just going to take these 3 screws. I like these screws because they you only need a quarter turn with the screwdriver, and you can work the rest out by your hand. That'll remove that. And I'm going to do a complete service on this reel, not only for you, but for my customer. So we're going to pull this spool. The spool has an axle that it rides on here, so don't be afraid or don't think that something got messed up when you pull the spool out and that shaft comes out. It's a free spooling shaft. On the back end of this reel, you'll see that there's a drive. This is the click mechanism, and this is the drive for the level wind. If we look inside the reel, and this reel's got some good lubrication on it, but inside the reel you'll see a plastic gear, and on that plastic gear, those teeth are what's going to move by that level wind assembly here as it turns, and the back of the spool is going to do that. So all we need here simply is a drop of oil in the back bearing, a little bit of blue grease, and there's some grease on there already, so we don't have to go crazy. But the blue grease, I use a Penn Reels Precision grease. It's a blue grease designed for reels, and just a little bit on each of the teeth. And you don't have to go crazy. It will work itself in as the spool turns. So with that done, then we're going to work this spool back in. You got to watch this braid when you put it in. You don't want to have the braid. You can see it's trapping here in the spool, and if you go to complete the assembly with that piece stuck in there, it's not going to turn well. So simply take a look at it and you can just pull it out. I use a pin. You can pull that out. Okay, so we're going to set this assembly aside. That's all you have to do there. We'll come back and lubricate the worm gear after we're done. So let's go over and take a look at that drag, see what's going on there. So there's 2 screws that hold the side plate on. That's a small screwdriver. And you may have viewed my video earlier on setting up your bench, but there's not a lot of tools that are needed in reel repair, but you want to make sure that the tools that you need for a particular job are close at hand. So you're noticing hands, I have that protective glove on. I'm cupping this assembly in my hand. There's nothing that's going to shoot out of this one. There is one main spring that sits right up here, and as you loosen this, it is going to push this plate out. But again, if there was a broken piece or a part in there, I would want to capture that so that I knew what broke and I can go replace that. Okay, so once you have the 2, the spring is actually pushing it out already. You can see the gap on the side plate. We're just going to pull the top off. This is that spring I was referring to. This is your free spool release, and here's your gear assembly. And the drag sits behind that first one, so I'm going to take off the ferrule and the 2 adjusters, and then I'm going to pull up on this to get the pinion off. The pinion is the whole main gear assembly. There's also a friction anti-reverse on a friction. This is not a instant auto anti-reverse. This is a friction gear, and I like to pull that. And then I generally, it looks like we're okay on this one. I just like to pinch it a little bit just to make sure that we tighten that up so that that can ride easy enough. Then I'm going to remove the main gear from the pinion. Just pull it up, check the pinion, it's fine. We're going to go reinstall that. Actually, I'm going to go put that anti-reverse back on now. I push down on the pinion, align the hole with the anti-reverse with the stud that's sticking out there, and just complete pushing that down. That's all that needs to be done there. And I did this to kind of show you the way this operates. So when we push this lever down, it's going to push this assembly out to allow for the free spool, and then when you turn this handle, it's going to kick this little push button out, and then the anti-reverse is going to work like this. You can see it moving here. When you go to backdrop, this friction piece of metal forces that in to operate the anti-reverse. Okay, so the customer said he's got a sticking drag. I'm going to believe, yeah, we can see right here. That's a pretty ugly drag. That's pretty well worn. And as I mentioned, I've gone ahead already and ordered a new one. So this is going to be relatively easy. I take my my razor knife, since I don't care about the drag, just work it in under it and pull that up. And again, you can see this is pretty well shot there. So I would tell you it was sticking. The bottom of the plate looks clean. You know, the back of the drag is a little bit better than the front side. I'm going to just take a little bit of steel wool just to make sure it's clean there. And then I have my replacement drag. So on that replacement drag, this is a Teflon, so I don't need to do anything in terms of lubrication. The other one looks like it was a felt. So we're going to go ahead and put the main gear back on, and we're going to make sure it locks in. We want to make sure it locks in with the spool gear. And we're going to go ahead and put this new drag washer in there, sits beautifully. We're going to go put the top washer on there, the metal one. Then we're going to go back to the parts bin where we had the ferrule. And we're going to go install that ferrule on here. And then there were 2 flex washers on here that they're concave. They can go one of 3 ways. They can go back to back, front to front, and they can match up. And it's all about tensioning. And I believe this is the way it came off, front to front. So it's kind of a spooning. So we're going to go put that on, and now we can reinstall the side plates. So this is what your gear is. It's very clean. While I have the blue grease open, I'll give it just a little bit of lubrication. I notice there's some pretty good lubrication in there already. We'll make sure we get some on that spool gear. We'll make sure we get some on the main gear as well here. You don't want to over lube anything. I find that one of the problems with most of the reels I have is that there's not enough lubrication, and the secondary problem I find is there's too much lubrication and it traps contaminants and makes the reel operate poorly. Okay, with that in mind, then we can reinstall this. We're going to simply just take this over. We're going to align these two holes here with the posts that this mounts to. We're going to make sure we press down the spring to hold the tension. And we should hear a click when it's properly seated. And you just heard that on the piece. You want to make sure that the free spool release is properly seated in the channels. We'll take out those two black screws. And again, if you didn't quite remember what screws went where, or the sequence that you took them off, you could go back to your pictures and take a look there. So we're going to tighten these down. And then we're going to just do a quick test on this to make sure that the free spool release works. Even though we don't have the pinion tightened yet, we have to put that E-clip on, if you'll recall, before we get the hole down right, but we'll take a chance here just to make sure. I like to test before I go too far in terms of reassembling the side plates, because you can put it all back together and find out something's sticking in there, and then you got to take it all off again. Okay, so I'm just going to press down on this to make sure that I have a release, and I just wanted to see it pop up and click, which is what just happened there. We'll do it again. So that is operating properly. If we turn to the back, we'll see that the gears are working correctly. So with that completed, then we're going to go ahead and align to the spool and reposition this back onto the reel. There's two little runners here, little plastic runners, and you saw that they move out. You want to make sure that they're put in, because there's a race back here and it needs to be inside that track here, and the only way it gets inside that track is when these two are pressed in. So if you're in a hurry and you tried to slam it on and you notice there's a space in the back, chances are that you did not get the those little plastic runners inside of it. So once we do that, we can tighten down the side plate screws here, the three of these. And again, I like these. These can be tightened by hand, except up to the last quarter turn or so. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to take our screwdriver, just complete that final quarter turn to snug it. And then we'll just come back up top here, and if you were paying attention, you know that the next piece that goes on is the star drag nut. And I remember I showed you that needle nose pliers. Sometimes when we work on this, that pinion gear is going to start to spin. In this case, it's making a liar. Oh, there it goes. It's starting to spin. So you want to grab that needle nose pliers and just grab that pinion shaft below until you can grab it from the top. There we go. It's just a way to steady it to make that star drag go on easier. And we're good now. Okay, and then once we do that, the next thing that we jump on is that the handle tensioner. The tension spring keeps the star drag from backing into the handle. Then we're going to go put the nut on. Now you will remember the last time I took the nut off before I put that E-clip on. I find it easier to put the nut on this time. The E-clip actually sits in a recess. Oh, I'm sorry, what am I doing here? Put the handle on. See, it's easy if you get hung up in these things. Put the handle on, then put the nut on. That would be better, okay? So we've been doing this 20 years now. It never ceases to amaze me that sometimes my mouth works faster than my hands, right? So, okay, that nut is on. We'll grab that 10mm wrench, and we're going to just snug that up. Now you can turn the last few turns on that star drag if you need to. Okay, now I'm going to grab that E-clip. This is the E-clip we were talking about. That just goes over the top of the post there. There's a little groove that it rides in. back to my needle nose pliers. I'm going to grab that E-clip with the needle nose pliers in the back of the post and just snap it in like that. And we're going to go grab the last piece here, which is the nut cap. Now sometimes the screw doesn't line up with the hole in the handle. I happen to know that it was going to. Got lucky. And here we go. So just a little bit of adjustment on this. And we're working fine here. Nice smooth reel. Now, moment of test. We got to put that drag in. There we go. We got a nice tight drag, which is what they were complaining about. So there we go. We're mission accomplished here. There you go. All right. Very good. So this reel's ready for the upcoming season, and it's all ready to go. Nice free spool on the reel. Operation correct there. Tight drag. We're set. Okay. So I hope that's helped. If you enjoy this kind of video, please like it on YouTube. If you want to see more of this type of video, please subscribe to my channel. I'll show you how to do things like the drag service here. I'll show you how to work on spinning reels and other popular reels. And if you happen to have a reel that you'd like to see worked on, if I can find one, or when one comes into the shop, I'll be certain to put it up there so that I can help you as you rebuild or repair or just generally service your reel overall. So with that, I'm going to thank you for viewing the video. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I hope this has been an enjoyable video for you to watch. Thanks again.